Call the police. That woman is destroying our property values. That's what Veronica Hale, president of the Cedar Crest Meadows Association, screamed at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday, standing on her chemically perfect lawn like she was defending a castle, and the criminal she wanted arrested was my wife, on her knees in our front yard, planting wildflowers in the soft, damp soil. I stood on the porch with my first cup of coffee, watching Judge Claire Marlowe in her rattiest jeans, hair escaping a messy ponytail, humming while she tucked each root into the ground, the air full of that fresh, rainy dirt smell that makes you feel like life is starting over. When a patrol car rolled slowly up to the curb, lights off, but authority radiating from every inch. The officer stepped out, took 3 steps toward my wife, then stopped dead in his tracks. "Your Honor, Judge Marlowe," he said. You could hear Veronica's clipboard hit the sidewalk, plastic clattering against concrete. Her mouth opened and closed without sound, while Claire just looked up, trowel in hand, that calm half-smile on her face, the one I've seen 1,000 times in court when someone doesn't realize the law they're bluffing with is already stacked against them. I'm Ethan Marlowe, 58, retired from the Ridgeview Heights Fire Department after 32 years of sprinting into burning buildings while sane people ran the other way. My knees creak, my shoulders ache, and all I wanted when we moved into Cedar Crest Meadows 3 years ago was quiet. Curved streets named after trees that were cut down to build them, kids drawing chalk art on sidewalks, retirees walking in slow loops with little dogs. My wife, Claire, has spent 15 years as a municipal court judge in Ridgeview Heights, the steady kind, the one who sentences drunk drivers, untangles petty disputes, and somehow still believes justice is worth the paperwork. For the first 2 years, we were textbook boring neighbors, paid our dues to the Cedar Crest Meadows Association, kept the grass at regulation height, no RVs in the driveway, no loud parties, just the occasional jumper cable rescue in winter. We knew Veronica Hale lived in the biggest house on Birchview Court, the one with useless white columns stuck on the front purely to shout, "I matter," former real estate queen turned HOA president who ironed her jeans and color-coded her garden tools. We waved, kept our distance, and frankly hoped we wouldn't ever matter enough to her to become a problem. Then this spring, Claire decided she was done babysitting thirsty imported grass in a semi-arid state. She spent a few nights reading about native plants like she was prepping for trial, then announced she was ripping out the Kentucky bluegrass and putting in real Ashmont State wildflowers, columbines, blanket flowers, Indian paintbrush, lavender borders. She spent weekends in the yard, knees in the dirt, hands stained brown and purple, looking happier than I'd seen her in months. That's when we heard the click-click-click of heels on concrete and saw Veronica marching up our walkway at 7:30 a.m., clutching a crinkled sheet of paper like a warrant, perfume hitting us 5 seconds before her voice. "This landscaping violates community standards," she declared, waving the paper. "I'm issuing a $200 fine for non-conforming vegetation." Claire stood slowly, brushed soil from her hands, and in that smooth, patient judge voice said, "Which specific covenant does this violate, Mrs. Hale?" Section 9.4 clearly states all yards must maintain community aesthetic harmony. Veronica snapped, nostrils flaring. Claire, who had already read every line of that covenant book with a highlighter and a lawyer's brain, replied, "Section 9.4 mentions dead or diseased plants and debris, nothing about native flowers, nothing about aesthetic standards, nothing that bans this garden." That was the moment we realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was someone rewriting rules in her head and counting on everyone else being too tired or scared to read the fine print. When Claire calmly refused to pay, the retaliation came fast. A certified letter 2 days later, fine doubled to $400, threatening a lien on our house, claiming an emergency board meeting had voted unanimously. But when Claire called the board members, Arthur "Art" Delgado, a 74-year-old Vietnam vet, rasped that he'd been in Denver visiting his grandson. Others hadn't heard a word, and it became very clear that unanimous meant Veronica, her neighbor Paula, and Paula's half-asleep husband Harold. Then we started hearing the other stories, the ones neighbors had swallowed for years. Art had been fined for planting tomatoes where his late wife once grew roses. Megan Price, single mom working 2 jobs, had forked over $300 to erase her kids' chalk art because it was unsightly. Mrs. Eleanor Brooks, a widow on Pinecrest Street, had been cited for excessive bird feeding because her bird bath attracted wildlife. The pattern was simple and ugly. Go after the people least likely to fight back. Claire filed a formal complaint with the Ashmont Community Housing Commission, citing state laws that require notice and a hearing before any fine, laws Veronica had ignored completely. And while the state started grinding through its processes, Veronica began cruising the street every morning in a white SUV, air conditioning blasting, camera clicking at every slightly brown blade of grass, every hose not perfectly hung, every newspaper on a driveway at dawn. What Veronica didn't see was what Claire was building in the background, a map of every violation, every phony emergency meeting, every story of targeted fines, all laid out on our kitchen table. She matched dates with board members' vacations and saw it clearly. Veronica launched her enforcement blitzes when the people who might stop her were conveniently out of town. Then came the architectural review ambush. The letter announcing our mandatory landscape modification hearing arrived thick and pompous, demanding that Claire's garden appear before the Cedar Crest Architectural Committee in 48 hours, warning of further penalties, bragging about an expert witness who would prove native wildflowers were inappropriate. The community center basement smelled like stale coffee and old potlucks, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, when Veronica sat down at a folding table with Paula and Harold, a briefcase positioned like a prop in a low-budget courtroom drama. Then Claire walked in. She didn't come as the neighbor Veronica thought she could bully. She came as Judge Claire Marlowe, black robes perfectly pressed, nameplate pinned to her chest, hair pulled into that tight judicial bun, leather briefcase in hand. The room shifted. Paula fiddled with her glasses. Harold jolted awake and whispered, "Are we in real court now?" "Good evening," Claire said in her courtroom voice. "I understand we're here to discuss state authority over native plants on private property." And then she laid out photographs of our garden with Latin names, state ecological studies, and highlighted sections of Ashmont Civil Code, all lined up like evidence. Veronica's expert, Roger Benton, a slick business partner from her real estate days, couldn't tell one columbine species from another, mumbling about overall appearance, while sweat gathered under the fluorescent glare. Claire listened politely, then slid out another stack of photos, this time Veronica's own backyard, an ornamental fence taller than allowed, an unapproved pond, a hot tub violating setback rules, all measured and documented. "Mrs. Hale," Claire asked, pen scratching calmly, "why did these changes never come before this committee?" By the time Veronica abruptly declared the hearing concluded, her authority was already visibly unraveling. A week later, she tried to reassert control with a nuclear letter, an emergency special assessment, demanding $5,000 from every household to cover legal expenses caused by one selfish resident. Due in 30 days, no appeals. The community center filled to bursting for the meeting. Retirees clutched those letters like verdicts. Young parents bounced anxious toddlers. And Veronica, in a navy blazer, stood beside a sad old projector and tried to sell $35,000 of legal defense costs. Then Claire stood up. In jeans and a sweater, she could have been any neighbor, but when she straightened her shoulders and held up a thick folder, the room went quiet. "Before we discuss paying anything," she asked, "which law firm is representing the association, and for what cases?" When Veronica named Harper Lang & Cole, Claire lifted documents from an Ashmont Public Records Act request and calmly explained that over the last 2 years, $47,000 had been paid not to that firm, but to Hale Community Services, Veronica's private company, including thousands for landscape consulting, when no landscaping work had been approved at all. Neighbors began to stand. Art, Megan, others, sharing that their checks, supposedly for community improvements, had gone directly to Hale Community Services. Then Claire added the final blow. The Ashmont corporate registry showed that Cedar Crest Meadows Association had been legally dissolved for 18 months for failing to file reports. Every fine, every fee, every assessment had been collected under the name of an organization that no longer existed, into accounts Veronica controlled. The basement erupted in whispers as Veronica grabbed her briefcase and stormed out, but it was already too late. That night, our kitchen became mission control for Operation Wildflower Justice. Claire, Art, and Megan sat around the table with coffee, printer ink, and that electric tension you feel when good people decide they're done being quiet. Step 1. Legally restore the association so honest people could run it. Art became interim president after new incorporation papers were filed and back fees paid. Step 2. Work with a civil attorney to pursue restitution and freeze whatever accounts they could, leveraging consumer protection laws that allow triple damages for illegal charges. Step 3. Take it statewide. Hale Community Services had contracts with 4 other HOAs, and Claire and Megan began assembling a public resource site for homeowners, a place where anyone could learn how to check corporate filings, challenge fines, and document harassment. Veronica responded with pure spite. Complaints to the Ashmont Judicial Conduct Council accusing Claire of bias. A bargain bin private investigator named Dustin McKay stalking our street and her courthouse parking spot. Anonymous flyers calling Claire a corrupt judge, even confronting Claire's 78-year-old mother in our yard and telling her to control her daughter. Then came the federal lawsuit, Hale versus Marlowe, accusing Claire of abusing her authority under color of law. It was legal nonsense wrapped in serious fonts, but it meant time, money, and stress. And still, Veronica wasn't done. One afternoon, she took her circus to the Ridgeview Heights Municipal Court lobby, waving a homemade, corrupt judge sign in front of security, ranting to anyone who'd listen. That's where Detective Liam O'Rourke asked a few simple questions, ran her name, and discovered 3 unpaid parking tickets and a bench warrant from the very court she was protesting. Her solo protest ended with handcuffs and a very public walk through the building she thought she could intimidate. 3 days later, she dialed 911 on my wife's garden. When Claire told me Veronica had reported her for destroying community property, I called Art and Megan and told them to come over. If this was the last act of the drama, nobody was missing the show. By the time the cruiser pulled up, neighbors lined the sidewalks like spectators at a parade. Art with his arms crossed, Megan with her phone recording, Mrs. Brooks leaning on her cane, determined not to miss the finale. The morning smelled like lavender and damp earth, wildflowers glowing under the sun. There she is, Veronica announced as Detective O'Rourke stepped out, pointing at Claire, who knelt by the columbines in dirt-stained jeans. The woman who is destroying community property and defying lawful HOA authority. O'Rourke walked over, and Claire rose, brushing soil from her knees. "Good morning, Your Honor," he said. The words hit the air like a gavel. Neighbors' eyes went wide. Whispers rippled through the crowd, and Veronica's face drained of color as the folders slipped from her hands and scattered across her perfect lawn. "Why, you're a judge?" she stammered. "Judge Claire Marlowe, Municipal Court," Claire answered, shaking O'Rourke's hand. "Ma'am," O'Rourke said to Veronica, his tone patient and precise. "Are you alleging that a judge gardening in her own yard is committing a crime?" She tried to talk about authority and community standards until Art stepped forward and, in that hardened veteran voice, told the detective exactly how long she'd been collecting illegal fines and routing money into her company, how the association had been dissolved, how they had documents and lawyers ready. Within 48 hours, Veronica resigned from every HOA position in Cedar Crest Meadows and the other neighborhoods she touched. Her federal lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. The Ashmont State Attorney General's office opened a case using the file Claire had built. In the end, Veronica Hale pled guilty to theft, fraud, and filing false police reports. She got probation, full restitution to every homeowner she'd targeted, and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board in Ashmont State. We held a real election that fall. Proper notices, secret ballots. No, raise your hand while I look the other way. Art became president, complaining the whole time. Megan became treasurer because she could actually use a spreadsheet, and we used the recovered $34,000 to do what associations are supposed to do: make life better. We built the Cedar Crest Community Garden, where Art grows tomatoes in peace, kids paint bright murals, Mrs. Brooks feeds birds from a sanctuary nobody dares complain about. Art used part of his pension to start the Cedar Crest Community Scholarship, helping local kids study law, public service, or environmental science. One of the first recipients was Megan's daughter, inspired by watching her mom stand up to a bully with a clipboard. A year later, we held the Wild Meadow Festival, bluegrass music floating down the block, smoke from Art's barbecue mixing with the smell of basil, tomatoes, and wildflowers. Claire's once illegal garden was featured in Ashmont Living magazine, praised by university researchers, and, ironically, credited with helping raise our home values once the story of our little rebellion spread. The state passed the HAIL Accountability Act, tightening HOA oversight and giving every neighborhood in Ashmont State tools to stop the next Veronica before she starts. Sometimes I stand on our porch in the early morning, mug warm in my hands, watching Claire in her old jeans, dirt on her fingers, tending the same wildflowers that almost got us dragged through financial ruin, and I feel something settle inside me, a sense that the world can tilt back toward fair if enough people push. And that's what I keep wondering, what I'll throw to you. When someone uses rules to bully instead of protect, at what point does staying silent make us accomplices? Is it enough to get your money back and watch them walk away? Or does real justice mean rebuilding what they broke and making sure no one else ever has to kneel in their own yard and wonder if planting a flower will get them fined, shamed, or arrested?